Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first free webinar, Back to Basic, Introduction to Bioarchaeology. So this webinar was originally recorded on 14th of January, but as we had some technical issues, basically I'm re-recording it all over again. So let me introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Natasha Sharkic, and I am PhD in bioarchaeology. So we noticed that there is really immense interest in this topic, and however, there's there's a lot of lacking of this kind of introductions. So we wanted to explain actually what is it about, and as you're going to see very soon, there is a lot of misunderstanding about what is actually bioarchaeology. So if you have any questions after this, you can contact us always in Aita Bioarchaeology. The Gmail is just under here. And let's begin. So first of all, let me introduce our team. We're all experts from different fields. Most of us are PhD in our field, and we formed this team with idea to offer short online courses as well as field experience that will cover different topics related mostly to bioarchaeology, but also in some other field, as you're going to see. The idea is that you get the most of the very intense courses, very specific in a certain areas, so you can get the most of the knowledge in the shortest period of time. The main reason for that was because we noticed that in universities, in master studies, the knowledge that is transmitted tends to be very broad and always lacking its practical aspect. So we tried to offer very short and very intense courses that will cover different topics from bioarchaeology of children, archaeozoology, genetics, paleopathology, advanced courses in bioarchaeology, and also covering archaeological topics such as survey and finding of archaeological sites. Again, very centered in finding of necropolis, because this is what we are doing. We are dealing with human remains, both on the field and in laboratory. And also we have courses about dental anthropology. So everything that is basically lacking in when you do some sort of general courses. So we wanted to offer you short and very efficient courses about these themes. We are also collaborating with paleoradiologists, and we are during this collaboration, we are also organizing a workshop in paleoradiology. So we have also field school that is presential and purely hands-on experience. So all of this can make one bioarchaeological complete profile for those who are interested. So starting from this one, we decided to offer free webinars, one per month, with the idea to cover different topics related to bioarchaeology. Most of these lectures will be given by members of Aita Bioarchaeology team, but we will also have some very interesting invited speaker, as you're going to see very soon. So first thing first, whenever we're covering some topics, where we're trying to also see what would be the best definition of this. And the problem with bioarchaeology is that there is so many different names, as you're going to see very soon, and also different definition, because the same thing in different country has a different meaning. So it's not anything universal. So this makes things quite difficult. So physical anthropology is also called bioarchaeology or bioanthropology. It's a study of physical development of the human body and human specimen, but it's also like studying human biological variability, both past and current, and the evolution of human species within the group of primates to which we belong. So, depending where you're coming, what's your background, you could actually be called the same thing. Like, I have a PhD in physical anthropology. In some other country, the same thing would be called bioarchaeology. And in some cases, some people who are doing the same thing that has the same, like the same title as I do, will actually work with living people. Some will work with primates. So the same name has so much different actually niches. So it can be very complicated to understand. Also, biological or bioarchaeology in some country means referring exclusively to human remains, but in some other countries also including human remains and like animal remains, or even floral remains of botanic remains. So it's also like creating a lot of confusion. So depending of the country, in one case you can go to bioarchaeology conference, and there will be also like apart from human remains, there would be a lot of animal remains and botanical remains, and some other places it will be purely human, and some other place it will include also primates. So it can be very confusing to start with. And then we have so many different names for people who are working with human remains, and some of them are synonyms, some of them are representing different things. So as you can see, I selected just some of them. There's even more. And of course, it's completely understandable that this can create a lot of confusion. And trust me, even between colleagues, sometimes we are not. We might use the same term referring to different things, or different terms referring to same things. But for this specific lecture, I will use the term bioarchaeology when I talk of human remains in in the context of the past populations. And after all, like all the physical anthropology can be a synonym to this, and it's also widespread a term in many countries. As I said, even like in Spain, where I obtained my PhD, like on my on my diploma, it's written physical anthropologist. But at the end, like bioarchaeology became more and more common. So I decided that we stick to this one. And also, after all, we are Aita Bioarchaeology, not Aita Physical Anthropology. So let's stick to this one. But also, you will frequently find some other terms like osteoarchaeology or paleopathology. It's connected, but it's like more of a niche inside of the same thing, because paleopathology is study of human remains, but focusing only on health and the disease. And then human ecology is more broader. It's also like under trying to investigate how humans correspond with their systems and where is their position. Bioanthropology, it's very similar to bioarchaeology, but many of bioanthropologists usually are not going to excavations because they don't have knowledge of archaeology. So all in all, it can be quite complicated, but forensics anthropology or forensic archaeology also, it can be it's more of recent remains, yes, and with some legal interest, as we are going to see very soon. We are going to make distinction between those two. But what is good thing is also that we often overlap, and the more knowledge that we have from different fields, the better experts we will be. So it's also like it's not so strict that one is doing just one thing, but there is often a mix. And also we need to collaborate, because, for example, nowadays genetics and molecular anthropology is getting more and more important. So if we don't work together, we won't be able to obtain as much information as possible. So this is really a beauty of our science, because it's so broad, it's so open, such a good mix of culture and biology that it's really something very challenging. But of course, it's need constant updates and a constant improvement in all possible ways. So to start with this, we'll start this lecture with some question that I often get. If you find human remains in a wood, what do you do? In a wood, or in your basement, or in a backyard? Simply imagine that you just find human remains without any context, without expecting to find them. And then what do? Are you calling archaeologists? Are you calling forensics? And how do you know which one should come in this case? How do we know if it's archaeological, maybe Roman burial, or maybe it's a murder case from 3 years ago? How do we make this distinction? Well, first of all, to understand better, we need to understand what is forensic anthropology, of course. And it's subdiscipline of bioarchaeology that is applying all of our skeletal analysis, all the method that we normally use to analyze human remains. And actually, bioarchaeology existed even before forensic anthropology, and it will start being applied, both forensic anthropology and forensic archaeology, relatively recently, in a context of serving the justice. And this is actually the main difference. Although we are using the same technique of analyzing human remains, this legal context is what is going to make the difference. So in bioarchaeology, in case of bioarchaeology, when you have archaeological remains, so something that is ancient, that is old, that is belonging to the past, we are studying human remains in order to understand better our past, in order to understand humans from the past, their lives, there's life expectancy, health, activities. So basically, we are doing one scientific investigation. But in a case when there is a forensic context, what we are doing basically is that we are trying to help the justice system, and we're helping two legal processes to understand more of this legal process. Forensic anthropology is usually connected with this idea of forensic osteology. So having skeletal remains, analyzing skeletal remains, of course, first question would be like, is it human or not human? And then what is biological profile? What is the age, sex, ancestry, and so on? All this is helping us narrow down the investigation. Then we're trying to figure out what is the post-mortem interval, which is, of course, very important when there is a trial, because we want to know how much time has passed from the moment when this individual died or was killed until the moment when we find it. And then, of course, the very important part is evaluation of traumas and pathologies. Both those ones that happen perimortem, which means at the moment of death or very close to moment of death. So that could mean signs of maybe injury that killed that person. It can be like the hit in the head, bullet marks of a bullet shell, or anything that is actually help us understand what is the cause of death. But it can also refer to some maybe torture that happened before, so like very close to this moment or death. But we also want to evaluate previous traumas and pathologies that happened during the life, because this could be very important data in order to discover the identity of this individual. So in short, the most important things about forensics are identification of the remains and always in a legal context. Also, what is not that known is that forensics assessment can be applied to living person. So forensic expert can also work with living, and in most of the cases, these are intent to discover, like to reconstruct the face of somebody, if there was some important changes or some important injuries, and also age estimation of a living. That's very common task, because in the case of any kind of minors accidents or sex trafficking, human trafficking, when we don't have any documents, we cannot rely, or we cannot communicate with a victim due to some language barrier or psychological barrier. Maybe that person doesn't want to give us the data, or in the case also that the person committed some crime and they say that they are minor in order to have a less of penalty, in this case, because of course we know that this system in every country is like that the children and minors have less consequences for their actions. So all of this is actually used to see how old this person is and what was their identity again, no? We're always about identity. So going back to our remains from the wood, our skeleton in the wood, so it's just a skeleton. We don't have anything that we can connect. We don't have, I don't know, mobile phone, documents, any kind of gadget, or any kind of object that can say like, oh, okay, this is from our times or not, a pack of cigarette or whatever, monster. So we want to see, like, we want to reconstruct, like, first question actually is like, is it really a bone? So are we really facing with real human skeleton or real skeleton in general? Then is it human or animal? Because if it's not in good state of preservation, it's easy to make a mistake, as we're going to see. And what is actually chronological age of the remains? Like, is it really forensic case or more archaeological? So, although it sounds funny, but actually human plastic remains were often confused with the real one. So there was several cases when police would be called, and then police is informing forensics department, and all of them coming just to discover that actually it's a plastic skeleton. But to understand better this kind of situation, we know that if there is a really crime scene, we should not touch anything there. So if you see, even from this distance, something that look like human remains, what you're gonna do? You will call the police and say like, oh, look, I think I find a dead body or dead person or anything like that, because you don't want to come and touch and see, because you might really make later a problem investigation. So it's better safe than sorry. It's better to inform police, then they come with forensic team and say like, oh, it's nothing, than to imagine intervene forensic scene and then be responsible for some provoking some more problems. So it's a kind of understandable situation. But okay, first question would be, is it really bone? Let's say yes, it is. Next question is like, is it human or animal? Again, this question might seem unnecessary, but it's not always like that, because when we have complete skeleton, of course, it's easy to say like, okay, this is human or this is animal. But most of the time, we actually have some scattered remains, or we have some cases like this one on the left that we can see that it's just like there is still some tissue and there's some things over it, organic or non-organic. So again, you cannot really be sure. So with this idea, again, better to be safe than sorry. Again, it's very common to call the police. And in US, they say that between 25 and 30% of all report cases are actually belonging to animals. Again, this can be sometimes making differentiation between human and animals can be tricky even for the professionals, especially if we're talking about very fragmented remains, burned remains. Non-adults can be very tricky because their bones are very small. They don't have epiphyses, which are this ending of the bones. They're not formed yet. So this can also look like pretty much as, it's hard to say, it can look like animal, but it can also like non-adult, and animals can be quite similar, especially if non-adult is very small. And then again, we often we will find like if the bones are burnt, which would be the common way to get rid of it, no? We know that from films and series. So they can be very alterated because high temperatures are actually not provoking the bones to shrink, to twist, and lose its original formation and shape. So that can be really tricky, even for us that we're doing this for like 20 years now. We can still be very puzzled about this, like, it might be not even so clear. So I will show you now, these are the remains. All of this now on the left side is a cremation of with mostly human remains coming from medieval, from Roman side. But then we also have some animal remains that were burned together with humans, which was a part of ritual at that time. As you can see, it can be very tricky to say the difference, especially because it's like they're so fragmented, their color, their texture, everything that we usually rely on to say the difference is very alterated. So again, it can make a lot of problems. And again, as I mentioned, non-adult and animals can look very similar. So on the left side, we can see a child of, on the right side, we can see the femur of the child, and the left femur of a dog. And as you can see, the size, the shape is not that different. So again, this can provoke a lot of confusion. And the last question that we have before we decided if something is belonging to forensic, is it forensic or is it actually archaeological, is the chronological age of those remains. So how do we estimate that? Well, in some cases, when we find, often when we're digging, we actually expect to find burials, or we're excavating an archaeological site. So we know that there will be probably human remains, like if you know what you're digging, you often expect to see these kind of things. But in some cases, it can be quite challenging because, of course, here it's very deep. We have a characteristic position or characteristic burial goods, and like already that is archaeology. It's an archaeological site or in an area and all that. But then we can also rely a lot of stratigraphy because there's the way of how the older things are usually on the bottom, and then something that is more recent would be on the surface. So as you can see on this illustration, pretty nice one, that they like the at very big depth, deepest and oldest remains should be often those ones that are belonging to prehistory. And then there would be something like more and more recent. Of course, it's not always like that, because sometimes those stratas are forming naturally with the passing of time, but sometimes, of course, there would be some disturbance when we want to, for example, hide the treasure, bury somebody very deep, and so on. So there can be some some way of disturbing. So the left image is like ideal one, and the right image is like more of what we expect to see in many cases. But even then, we can see to which layer this belongs and how much of the other layers is cutting. Because if we make really nice profiles, we can see like every kind of disturbance, and also the changes in the soils are helping very much. So most of the cases, most of the times, we know, okay, and we know pretty clearly, but sometimes it can be still complicated, especially in the cases when there is no archaeologist to dig, but it's more of construction work. Why is this a problem? Because construction workers and with machines, especially when they're not expecting anything archaeological, they tend to destroy all these layers. So we cannot read it like we normally do, and we are just like all of a sudden run into skeleton without having any context before that. And if this skeleton doesn't have any kind of burial goods with it, it doesn't show any kind of anything that can be easily to conclude, like is it archaeological or not, then we might have a necessity to check what it can be. One of the easiest way to estimate the age of an individual or object or a plant or whatever is using the C14 method. So C14 is actually relying on the difference between isotopes C12 and C14, both of them, their decomposition period. So to make this explanation as easy as possible, living plants, and through plants also animals, are absorbing C14 and C12 from the atmosphere, and they're incorporating them into sugars. When animals eat plants, they receive the same ratio of C14 and to C12 as it's present at the Earth's atmosphere at that time of feeding. So if the person, animal, plant is alive, well, they will have equal these kind of levels. When the plant or animal dies, it ceases to take C14, but the C14 present its biological material continues to decay. So there is decay of this isotopes, and consequently, the ratio of C14 and C12 in the remains will gradually decrease over the time. And since we know the rate of this decrease, and it's a very slow process, and it takes longer time to complete decrease, so we know like how much of this percentage of this decrease has happened. And this is how actually we can estimate the age. So the older the finding is, the last C14 will remain. And this is a method that can not really tell us precisely a year, but it can be very close, like up to 50 years plus or minus, which for archaeology is like a very precise estimation. Doesn't work well for forensic, obviously, because it's in forensic we need to know exactly like how much, not maybe months has passed, or if not years. But in archaeological context, when we need to know anything even close to possible like the datation, everything can be helpful. How do we find the grave if we are actually doing intentional search? So it's not now the case that we find the remains in the wood, but we want to find those remains. Or we are looking for a grave, or we are looking for a person. So what do? Well, one of the ways to search for an individual, if you know more or less where this individual or grave could be, is to rely on disturbance created on the ground by the presence of burial establish a series of effects that can facilitate the detection of the grave. So disturbance, there will be always some changes of vegetation. So normally, or if because we maybe change the soil, like making a hole, so the layers that were down, now they're up, and it's more airy, so the water will enter more easily. So it's possible that above human remains there is more vegetation, and also it can also lead to, like, of course, the decomposition of human remains can also lead to having some different types of plants. But if there was a maybe rocky, there was maybe rocks on the bottom, so now they're on the upper part, or maybe the body was wrapped in a plastic, or this person wears some non-organic materials that are not falling apart. This can also influence in vegetation that is not growing as much. So again, we can see some differences here. And also, like as we said, that there will be changes in a thing. It's inevitable to have different sort of soil. It's more looser area. We can also have some depression, as we're going to see, because when there is the body is taking certain volume, no, and when there is a composition, this volume is like reduced. So if the soil was up to here, it will be less soil. So we will see a little depression in the soil, no, where the body is. And also, as we said, is sometimes also the body begins to decompose. So alkaline soils it's changing the composition of the soil is changing. And this can produce also, like, it can lead to that some other types of plants are growing. If we don't know where exactly the grave can be, what we are also relying on is aerial photography. So we can make prospection of the area. We can search for some alterations of the soil by using some sort of photography from the air. So as you can see on this illustration, also, like, if there is any kind of disturbance of the soil, whether it's like the ancient walls or maybe some old trenches, everything will lead to some changes of the soil, and it will lead to or more or less vegetation. And in the past, for this were used airplanes, which of course are quite expensive, but now with drones, this sort of observation from the air became way easier. And believe it or not, what archaeologists often do, especially in winter when we are not on excavations, we're spending time with our computer searching Google Earth, because in many cases, you can actually find pretty easily some archaeological site just by looking on Google Earth. So look at this one. It's so clear, because you see these spiral structures. This cannot be made by nature. This has to be some structure made by human. And of course, when they open some probe trenches just to check if there is something, this was basically medieval fortress. So you can say it quite easily when there was something in the past there. So even if it's covered with the soil, there would be always some intervention in something different in this case. Airborne laser scanning is LiDAR. It's a system which can be also used for inspecting of the soil. Normally, it used to be born with the aircraft or helicopters, and then once again, now we have drones that are doing the same thing, way more cheaper, lighter, and easier to use. And they're also like they're functioning with these laser pulses that are directed toward the soil, to the ground, and they're coming back. Of course, depending on the structure that is under the inside of the soil or under the soil, the signal will be different. And this is again giving us the information about what can be inside of the soil. Metal detectors can be both enemies of archaeology or big helpers. They're based on both magnetism and conductivity because they correspond to high electrical conductivity of all metals. They correspond to high electrical conductivity of metals, and different metals would give different signal and also different sound, so we know what kind of metal is there. So they can be really useful in archaeology. But why I say that they're also making problems for when they're in the hands of those who are not archaeologists, because unfortunately metal detectors are used widely for those who are actually interested only in grave robberies. And what they're doing, actually, they're destroying the whole archaeological site just to grab some valuable metals. And like that, as I explained previously, we really have to do excavation slowly, following the stratas, following the layers. And what they do is usually just to make a big hole, destroy everything, even like destroy everything on their way, and then just to grab valuable metals or valuable objects and then sell them on the black market. Also, we can use georadars in order to search both for graves or for some other archaeological structures. So this is ground penetrating radar that is a non-destructive geophysical search instrument, which is operating using directional antennas. And like this, we're actually getting the signal of what are the objects under the soil. Of course, if it's done right, we will get the whole map. And like that, we can know what is under the soil, how big it is. And we can basically, thanks to that, make the whole, we can plan in advance the archaeological excavation, because we know how big the site is, how many possible, like, is there some construction, and like that we can make planification how many years it can take this excavation, how to start, where to start, when we have pretty good map of what is under the soil. And also we can use dogs to search for graves. And these human remains detection dogs, they were in use since a very long time in order to find human corpses or alive human in both some disasters or whenever there is like earthquakes, landslides, and similar. And there are those one who are detecting live human, and those one who are detecting human corpse. And they always gave excellent results. But then the archaeologists came to idea to use those dogs in order to search for even like much older graves. And again, for something incredible happened, that actually they realized the dog can sniff and detect human remains from such a long time that they actually managed to find prehistoric graves, which is really incredible. And in this case, there are several articles on this topic, but it's like even they sniff out 3,000 years old graves in Croatia. And as you can see, here the soil is really bad. And I mean, there's very rocky terrain. And in this case, you cannot pass through this with these geological radars, ground penetrating radars, because of this kind of terrain. And in this case, dogs did excellent job. And if you're interested to dive deeper into archaeological surveys and field methods, I recommend you this course that will start from 15th of March, and is dedicating basically to that. Another very useful knowledge or tool in estimating the age of human remains is taphonomy. Knowledge in taphonomy can help us estimate how much time has passed from the moment of death until the discovery of human remains. So there's a lot of post-mortem changes that are happening very quickly after death. Some of them literally in up to like 20, 30 minutes after death. Some of them may take more time, but at some point, like the body will pass with several phases very quickly, and then it's coming to phase of decomposition and skeletalization that can take much longer time, and this is more delicate process, more depending of more factors as the previous one. We're going to see that in a second. Of course, I don't have time to explain all of this, and this is just one class. But if you're interested in it, in our course of mortuary archaeology, we have the entire, actually 2 classes dedicated just to taphonomy, and we are going to make much deeper dive in it. But for the moment, I will just mention some changes in a body. Well, moment when a person dies, the bodies start cooling down. So this process takes around, or like the temperature is, the body is losing 1 degree per hour. So this is quite precise way of measuring the time of death. So if you know that average human temperature is 36 degrees, and we find a body that is on that has like 20 degrees. So we know that it's been 16 hours, more or less, that passed from the moment of death. And also this is going until the body reach the outside temperature. So if the outside is very warm, the body can also become warmer with the time passing. But the point is that there is no any more the system that is regulating the temperature of the body. So the body is influenced by the temperature of the outside. And with the time also, with this during this process of during this post-mortem changes, the body will become stiff. So in the first phase, then it will lose the stiffness, and all of this can be measured. As you can see here, this quite good table, like very simplifying and very easy to understand. Like if the body is warm and not stiff, we know that there's been just like not more than 3 hours. If it's still warm and stiff, it's been 3 to 8 hours. If it's cold and stiff, 8 to 36. And if it's cold and not stiff, because we said the stiffness is passing after some time, then it's more than 36 hours. Of course, there might be some environmental influences that can change this, that can intervene in this process. But this is like the most simple explanation about these processes. And then we're coming to the process of, so we have also, I didn't mention, but the body, first there's a paleness, and then it's coming, some parts of the body are becoming like more of purple, then darker. All these changes, and for the color and the skin texture and everything, all of this is used to understand better how much time it has passed. Of course, you can understand easily how this can be crucial in forensic investigation, because if we know that the person was murdered 3 days ago or 1 day ago, we can easily also know, like, it can ease a lot this investigation, both in the terms of identifying the person, but also identifying a possible killer. And then starting the process of putrefaction, which is references to breaking down of a body in terms of decomposition of proteins and breakdown or cohesiveness between tissue, liquefaction of most of the organs. And it's when these tissues is actually opening. And the time it takes putrefaction to occur can depend on many different factors. It can depend of internal factors such as age of individual, sex, overall structure and condition of the bodies, cause of death, external injuries, and so on. So now when we come to purification, it's not anymore so precise like 3 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 36 hours. Now we are coming really to the different counting of the time, because all of these changes and internal factor, external factors can influence big time into this to this process. So, for example, the slower the putrefaction process would happen in young, healthy male individual. Why is that? Because the male individuals have more muscle than females in most of the cases, no matter if they are actually athletics or not. It's just simply because this is the structure of the body. So muscles take more time to decompose than faster. They're decomposing slower actually than the fat. Old people and babies, they tend to decompose much faster. Then also, if there were some external injuries, this person would putrefy much faster, because open injuries means that insects and bacteria and everything, it has like open door to all possible pathogen that is going to speed up. Also, this kind of smell can attract faster in like animals. So it's also not same like if the person was taking some antibiotics before death, because this can slow up the process, what kind of diet this person had, how much time has passed from the last meal. All of this can actually have an influence. And external factors that can influence, and they are including like temperature, moisture, air exposure, light exposure, clothing, factors. So the first sign of putrefacients are this greenish colorization outside of the skin and abdominal wall, and also there would be this grass-producing bacteria that will result in tissue swelling. So when we talk about external factors, the conditions in which the body will decompose or putrefy faster would be warm and moisture. So when we have like, let's say, tropical wood, this is the ideal situation for like losing all the soft tissue very quickly. Also, if the body exposed outside, like on the surface, and even better in the wood or something, this will speed up a process pretty much, because of course it's easier for animals to be attracted to the body, and there will be more insect, also exposure to sun, to air, and all this can speed up the process. If the body is inside of the pit or grave, that can slow down, and there can be also some additional factors. If it's wrapped in plastic, if there's a coffin, all of this is actually influencing to this process. And also a little bizarre information, just for like, is like this existence of coffin birth, or it's actually that this post-mortem change, that once, as we said, that there will be abdomen will swell, and at the end there will be explosion of the abdominal. So in this, if this process, if a female was pregnant, then this can lead to expulsion of the fetus through vaginal opening, and this actually can lead us to wrong idea that woman had a delivery, that she was pregnant and gave a birth and died of that, because we'll find remains of fetus between her legs, but this can be actually just due to this decomposition process. And then also during this decomposition process, in which that organic substances are broken down into simpler organic or inorganic material. So the body of living organism will become to decompose. And there's also a lot of helpers in this process, such as insect, animals, and so on. And all the organisms decompose differently, but they are all going through the same stages of decomposition if they're decomposed. And the last stage will be skeletonization, when there's no more soft tissues and there's just this skeletal remains that are left. And in this case, in this process, tissue will be completely removed and only the bones will stay. How long this takes, how long this process takes? Well, it's depending on so many factors. But let's say it can take from 3 weeks in some extremely wet and warm, exposed to an insect kind of environment. Not only insects, but also other animals. Like, let's say a person died in tropical wood, it's very warm, it's very wet, there's a lot of insects, there's a lot of animals, carnivores, and they can really can clean everything within 3 weeks. Other situation, it can take several years, but normally most of the cases after 3 years, in some normal conditions, there would be no more soft tissue. Of course, don't take this as absolute true, because as I said, there's a lot of things that can influence to this. And in some cases, actually, this the skeletonization may never occur. Let's take the simplest possible scenario: sub-zero temperature. If the body is frozen, it will never decompose as long as it's in this kind of temperature. So we had this very famous case of Otzi that actually got frozen in prehistory and stay perfectly preserved until nowadays. The same like we have if we have some vegetables or meat and we put them in a freezer. As long as the freezer is working, they will stay frozen. They will not decompose. Same happens with the human body. If it's exposed to temperature under zero, the tissue will stay preserved. There will be actually no this process of putrefaction or decomposition. And in some cases, some bones will become fossils. Not all of the bones, of course. We know how rare the fossils are. But generally, if it's 10 years, 10,000 years, sorry, or older, it's considered to be a fossil. As we said, in some cases, this process of decomposition or this putrefaction will be stopped intentionally or by natural influences. In some cases, this will not continue. There will be this process will stop at some point. And one of the ways to stop it is to dehydration. So it refers to drying of the body or tissue due to the loss of moisture. So in cadavers, continuous moisture loss occurs through unprotected skin and surface membranes, resulting in the moisture contained the tissue being equal to the surrounding air. Normally, its conditions are naturally dry, such as in desert, or artificially dried in a crypts, for example. A rapid or completely mummification can take place. I often use this for better understanding this idea of herbariums that we probably all had when we were children, or even if you pick up the flower. If you just pick up a flower and put it in a vase or put it on a table, it will decompose with a time. But if you pick up the flower and you put it inside of the book, it will dry. And why is this happening? Because there would be pressure on it, but also the paper of that is a book is made of is very dry and it's very well absorbing. So it's absorbing all the moisture from this leaf or this flower. So it will lose the moisture faster than the decomposition process can start. So in this case, we will have this dry leaf or dry flower basically forever, as long as not again exposed to moisture or to water directly. The moment when this occurs, the decomposition will and putrefaction will start again. So as long as you keep it in dry condition, it can stay like that. Well, something similar happened with human body in this kind of environment. If a human body is exposed to high temperature, very dry air, and especially if there is some sort of movement of the air quick, same that happens like with a hair dryer, then the body will lose the moisture very quickly and there would be no chance of decomposing. So this is like a natural embalming process that we can see in different areas, such as well, we know that in Egypt, before they mastered this very complex way of making mummies, that actually first mummies were those one that were natural mummies. So just simply they would bury a body in the sand. Sand is very hot. It's in Egypt, so it's very hot anyway. But the sand is absorbing all the moisture of the body. So it's like it's resulting in very quick drying of the body, and this is leading to natural mummification. We have these examples from Cappuccini crypts in Napoli. Again, Napoli in Sicily is very hot place, and this crypt has and the air was very dry, so receptive to humidity, like of the corpses, and also there was always air movement because there was everything was open and under the soil, and so there would be like a lot of this naturally drying. As you can see, some of them didn't make it so perfectly, but we still have like perfectly preserved clothes, a lot of skin preserved, hands, and so on. And also, we can find the different types of burial, and depending of this, we can also, sometimes we have to adapt of our way of investigation. Also, apart from individual graves that we mentioned by now, the graves can be also mass or collective. What's the difference? Well, mass are multiple bodies that are buried simultaneously without any subsequent modification. Some of them, it's not very common. Of course, that a lot of people die in the same way, in the same time. So usually this can be after some battle, during some pandemics, during some big accidents, or Pompeii is a good example of it, like when there was volcano eruption and resulted in covering all this body with ash. So these can be examples of mass burial. Collective ones are, again, you have a lot of individuals buried in the same place, or at least two or more, so it's not individual, but they can be, there is some time lapse between them. It can be from several months to several centuries, but the point is that they didn't die in the same time. So how do we calculate this minimal number of individuals? How do we know, how many individuals die here? What we usually do in the simplest way is this minimal number of individuals. And we want to know, we're counting of what part of the body is repeating the most. So the easiest is you have 5 skulls, so you have 5 individuals. But it's not always like that, of course. In some cases, we have like a lot of mixed remains, and in this case, we cannot rely on entire bones. In this case, we will just we'll focus on specific characteristic of the bone, maybe distal part, the proximal part. Now I will show you some images and then make it more easy to understand. So first step is separating the human remains by anatomical parts. So you can see skulls on one place, clavicles on another, vertebrae on another, hand bones, leg bones, and so on. And then we want to separate them by left and right. And then we are seeing which one is happening, which one is repeating the most. So if the bone that is repeating the most is right femur, and we have 14 right femurs, we have at least, like, minimal number would be 14 individuals. But it's not always that easy, of course. What is really important is that we avoid counting 2 times the same bone. So like in this case, we can say, okay, we have one ulna, then we have one clavicle, then we have one femur, then we have a vertebra, then we have another humerus, and then we have another humerus. But it's not like that. Why? Because these 3 parts of the bone can belong to the same bone, as you can see, from here to here. So we cannot count fragments, each fragment as a different bone. We have to select, saying like, okay, are we going to count heads, the proximal part, or are we going to count distal part? But we cannot count all of these. So that's another important information if we want to count properly this remains. And also, what is very important as well is just to pay attention on the age, sex, and size, as well as pathology. Like in this case, we have 2 left and 2 right femurs, okay? But does it mean that we have 2 individuals? Think about this for a second. We cannot have here, like, why? We have here at least 3 individuals. We don't count mandible here because mandible is, we can see it's an adult individual, so it can belong to one of these. But we have here on the left, on the most left, we have non-adult, right? And then we have an adult. We know the difference because we have epiphysis on upper and lower part. Then we have another non-adult. Those 2, like the one on the left and this one on the middle, they're probably belonging to same individual. So they're matching, they're making a visual pairing. But then this one that is on the most right extreme is also belonging to an adult. But we don't have just 2 adults and 2 non-adults, because these 2 adult femurs, they cannot belong to the same individual. You can see how different they are in their morphology, in their size, and we know that these are 2 adult individuals at least, and then 1 non-adult. So we have to pay attention on all these details. It's not only about counting the bones, but also taking into account that they might have some differences in all this age, sex, size, pathology, and so on. And then what now when we know that we know where the bones are coming from, we know how old they are, we know if it's archaeological or forensic context, we know is it a one individual or more individual. We did all of this, assumingly. And now what we have to estimate is biological profile of this individual. So what we want to know is all this information that can be provided from skeleton, both in archaeological or in forensic cases. So the first step is estimation of the sex. Easiest way to estimate the sex is relying on coxal, because the pelvis bones are very different in male and females, because in males they tend to be like more narrow, in male they're more narrow and longer, and in female it's wider, and the birth channel in females is made to basically for a baby head, which is huge to pass through. So it has to be more open, more bigger. And it doesn't have to do nothing if the female already had the birth or not. It is just about structure of the bones. Then we also have differences in the shape of the skull, which is also very reliable. There's a lot of points that we are looking at, but some of the most important are the form of the frontal bone. Also, we are looking at the mastoid bones. We are looking at a general, like nuchal crest, goniac. So all of this can help us estimate the sex of this individual. And you can see it on the left are male individuals, on the right are females, and this skull that we have here on the photo is very male. As you can see, like it's really robust, it's really big, but what is most important, we are looking at this part, mastoids that are behind the ear opening, and also zygomatic bones, and these are one frontal, how the frontal bone is formed. Is it flat or it's like wavy? So all of this can tell us about the sex of individual. What is really important is that we are estimating the sex and not gender individual. There are two different things completely. And on 11th of March, we are going to have a free webinar dedicating to this topic. Dr. Uroš Matić will talk about the differences between sex and gender. But for this moment now, we'll just say that gender is something that is culturally defined and means all these roles that are connected with a certain sex, while the sex is more biological. So sex, that can be like it's based on chromosome, reproductive organs, and in our cases, hormones, and in our cases, on the shape of the bones. While gender, it's all these attributes and roles and entitlements that are given to certain gender. So like it can be also like depend, and that's something very culturally defined. Depending of the culture, there's a certain these roles of the gender can be quite different. And then we're also trying to estimate the age of individual. On this picture down on the right is showing development of non-adult bones, and as you can see, they're growing in the length, but they're also in the beginning they don't have distal and proximal part, the epiphysis, the ending of the bones, and with the time these are developing, and at the end of growth, when a person becomes an adult, is actually when these epiphyses are fused. So in children, it's more or less easy to estimate. Also, we are relying on eruption of the tooth, which is a method that is very precise, more or less up to 18 years of age, we can rely pretty much on eruption of the tooth. But then when the individual is not non-adult anymore, when it becomes an adult, then there is no more growth. Then we are relying on different sort of wearing and wear and tear, basically how the bones are becoming more degenerated. So we have a lot of different methods. Of course, there is no time to dive in all of this, but one of like very popular old ones are checking the tooth wear. And this is, I say, that's probably the oldest one, because we know this was applied on animal in the past. So there's even saying that don't, how it's in English, don't look at a gifted horse in a mouth, or don't check their teeth. Wanted to say, like, if it doesn't matter if the horse is old or young, if it's a gift. But basically, this is how we know it's a Latin proverb. So we know that that even in that time, they know that you can actually estimate the age of horse in that case, but also an individual based on tooth wear. Of course, there can be other things that can influence in this, some genetics, habits, the construction of the tooth, dental hygiene, loss of tooth due to caries and other things. This can also influence quite a lot on this dental wear, but as a general rule, we can apply this for age estimation. Then we can see also on the left, like the changes on the ending of ribs, or this is on the right side, the auricular surface of the bones. Again, another system of that is how to estimate the age, and there is many more. So, but what is important to say is that not all of them are equally precise. In order to get the good information about age, the best is to use different parameters. Then we also want to know the ethnic origin of individual. There's differences in form of the scalp, form of the nose, eyebrows, and how like also the form of the tooth, how that are quite different, or in between different ethnic groups of individuals from different ethnic origin. Of course, there's an extreme in these cases, but there's also a lot of individuals that are presenting a characteristic of two or even more, and more like mixed. And also, what can we say? We can say about habits and physical activities, or even profession of some individuals. We know how active a person was during their lives and which kind of muscle they use, because the muscles are actually reacting when we're pulling them a lot, when we're putting a lot of effort on them. They are trying to not to break, and then they will, like also on the zones where the muscles are inserting to bones, they will become thicker. So when we see some the bones that are thick, when we have these muscle insertions on a certain areas, we know that these bones were quite a lot in use. So this could be one of tools to guess what kind of physical activity this person have, how much physical activity this person have, and even in some cases, what was the profession of this individual. And also we can say a lot about some habits. For example, here we have on the right, we have actually pipe smoker. This person used to put the pipe always in the same place, and we do a lot of like sticking a pipe between teeth. At the end, it's forming a little groove in the tooth. But we also have we could also guess some other profession. It's very common for women that work with a yarn to have some specific grooves on their teeth, and so on and so forth. So actually, we can tell a lot about a profession and physical activities based on these kind of parameters. Additional, what we say is like diseases, traumas, and even some cases cause of death in individuals. So we can see different patterns from dental wear and dental hygiene, loss of tooth, and all that, which of course in forensic cases can be also very useful, because if we have dental chart and we find tooth, it can be very important for identification of individuals. In the context of archaeological remains, it can tell us a lot about this hygiene of the person, but also exposure to different diseases, as even diseases or some physiological problems in the childhood, because tooth are forming in the childhood, so some of them can encapsulate the signals, the problems from the childhood. Then we can say about the various traumas, various injuries, and how well they were treated. That's another very important part for us when we study the population in the past, how much this is of care, how much medical knowledge this individual got, and how they recover or not after some disease or some period of external stress. We can see on the right side, and this right circle, it's signs of physiological stress as well. Then we can see a lot of different infectious diseases, like the one on the left down. This is actually collapse or of vertebrae due to pot disease. That is actually tuberculosis of the spine. And similar things on the right side under down. We see this infection of the body, notable on the vertebrae, but on the middle we can see actually a case of tumor, really big one. So we can say a lot about health of the past populations. And in some cases, of course, we can say cause of death, such as bullet on the left case. On the right case, these are the famous Iberian skulls that were decapitated and used as a trophy with these big nails that were actually piercing the skull, and they would be nailed to the entrances of the city or the doors. Very strong message to the enemies, like, don't mess with us. And of course, at the end, also, it's important to notice that we can say also geographical origin of individuals, because there's a strontium is very specific for different areas of this planet, let's say, and these signals are actually they're ending up in our body through different intakes from bioavailable strontium, through soil, through animals that we are consuming, through plants, and so on. So we are having different signals depending on different area that we live. And what is really important and very interesting is that our teeth, once when they're formed, they are not changing their signal anymore. They stay. So during the childhood, we have formation of the tooth, and they will have the same signal like in childhood, while the bones, long bones, they're constantly remodeling, renovating, let's say, and they have a signal from more recent period of time, so 5 to 10 years. And for example, if I die here in Spain, where I am right now, somebody can find my skeleton, analyze my teeth, and say, okay, she was born and she spent early childhood, at least like a first years of life, or up to 18 years of life in Serbia. But then they can analyze my femur, for example, my long bones that contain last 5 to 10 years of my life. And they say, okay, but last year of her life, she spent in Spain. So she migrated from Serbia to Spain, which would be, of course, completely true. So this is also like very powerful tool to know like what is geographic origin. And of course, this can help us even in forensic cases when we have case of migrations or migrants that don't have any documents. We can actually say where this individual is coming from. And of course, let's not forget, probably the most powerful tool that we have nowadays is DNA. And that can be, again, used both in forensic cases for direct identification and also for a lot of investigations in bioarchaeology, where we use Asian DNA, so aDNA, and it can be used for evolutionary studies, what is helping us to trace evolution of species, including humans, and their genetic changes over the time. It can be used also for analyzing human ancestry and migrations, such as reveal how Asian population migrated and mix between them, shedding the lights of historical and prehistorical human movements. And let's not forget, for example, that some of most exciting recent discoveries, such as discoveries of Denisova, were made just based on DNA. The remains that they had were so fragmented, so poorly preserved, that they could actually, based on morphology of those bones, they could never say that it's a new species, that a new human relative. But thanks to DNA, they say, oh, okay, this is not Homo sapiens sapiens, this is not Neanderthal, it's somebody else. So they actually discovered species. So also we can see how humans migrated, how our other lines of and how they mix between them. Also, the same studies at some point discovered that not only human mixed with Neanderthals, but also mixed with Denisovanians, and that some of us have DNA still with one or two of those. So that actually not only that we know that they mix, but we know that these little hybrids, they survived, and they were obviously well integrated in the community because they were able to have their own offsprings. Also, archaeogenetics can help us a lot to understand Asian civilization, their genetic relationships, how they interact between them. We can learn a lot about some also extinct species that are not anymore between us. But what is also very exciting nowadays, we can learn about disease research, such as how diseases are evolving. We can even detect the diseases that we cannot detect based only on human remains, because maybe they're not leaving any changes on the human remains, so we cannot based only on the bones, maybe we don't see it, or maybe they're giving a very similar signal to some other diseases. But once when we do DNA analysis of these pathogens, for example, of these bacteria, we can say, aha, well, now we know. So it's also very exciting and very interesting. And also, we are using a lot this facial reconstruction, both in forensic and in bioarchaeology, because on forensic cases, obviously, again, we're talking about identification. We want to know who this person can be, and like that, we can narrow down the possible list of missing people. We can more easily recognize, because maybe relatives or family members can say, like, okay, I think this is probably a person I know. Also, I think it's quite I think it's much better way, because if the person has to recognize their deceased one, their family member, especially close one, and they're in really bad condition of putrefaction, or they were maybe murdered in some really brutal way, this can leave the traumas for the rest of their lives. So not only they have to deal with losing their member, or maybe very close family member, but they also have to stick with this image of this maybe mutilated face and things like that. Is horrible. So this can be really better way for identification. Of course, not based only on that. This can be accompanied with DNA analysis, but just to narrow down the investigation, like, okay, does anybody knows this individual? Also, we can use the same methods for reconstruction of course, in one hand, we have like reconstruction of faces of famous people from the past, but it can also be a very nice way to reconstruct individuals like commoners from the past, just to see how they look like, because it's always curious to know. And also, I think it helps us a lot to connect with them, because we will see that maybe this person that lived, I don't know, like 5,000 years ago, looks like our neighbor. So it's a kind of nice way to understand that we are all humans, and after all, we can be very very alike. And as I said, we are recording this a little bit later, so the idea was to make announcement of this completely free basic course in bioarchaeology, but as the date of this has already expired, I would like to invite you for those who missed this course, to join us starting from the 1st of September, when we are going to have another free course in bioarchaeology. And also, if you find those topics interesting and you want to have a deeper dive, We have various courses. You can see mortuary archaeology, advanced course in bioarchaeology, bioarchaeology of children, dental anthropology, introduction to archaeozoology, paleopathology, statistics, also very useful, and archaeological survey and methods. In English and Spanish, unfortunately, we don't have the same amount of courses in English and Spanish, but there's still quite a good number in both languages. So you can also check this in our page, aitabioarchaeology.com, aitabioarch.com. And those courses are starting from 15th of March, so you are on time. And of course, I would like to use this opportunity to invite you all to EAA, which is annual meeting of archaeologists in Serbia, in Belgrade. That is my hometown, and it will take place from 3rd to 6th of September. That was all. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to see you on some of our future webinars or on any of our online courses.